That is the fundamental basics of all musical notation. Let's look at that in MIDI. So in this video, we're going to pick up from where we left off last time, looking at inputting MIDI, but we're going to look at how it relates to notation.
Music originally came from oral tradition, where songs were taught and remembered by ear rather than being written down. In the Middle Ages, musicians began using simple marks to show the shape of melodies in chants. Later, a system of lines was developed to show pitch more accurately. And throughout the Renaissance, Baroque, Classical, and Romantic periods, notation expanded to include rhythm, dynamics, and expression, eventually becoming the standard way of writing music across Western culture.
So it's important that we understand the basic principles of musical notation because the timing structure for MIDI inside of Logic is based on that theory. But don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. Let me break it down for you. So the easiest way that I've found to explain notation is, say you have point A and point B, and we're going to call this one bar of music. So as it's one bar of music, let's give it the number 1. If we cut this one straight down the middle, you get 2 halves. And again, if you were to cut that in half, you would get 4 quarters. And again, you would get 8 eighths. And again, you would get 16 sixteenths. So musical notation works in exactly the same way. The only difference is, in classical notation, that they have these special names and these special symbols. So if you compare this chart to the step input keyboard, you can see if I hover over each note, a whole note, 1/1, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, a 32 note, and a 64 note. So if you start at 1 and keep dividing by half all the way down, that is the fundamental basics of all musical notation. Let's look at that in MIDI. So here, let's create a MIDI region using the pen tool. Now this, as default, is 1 bar long. Now if we click the scary looking button that says score, we're going to be presented with notation. On the left, you can see these 2 numbers, here 4/4. This is your time signature. So the top number tells you how many beats are in each bar, and the bottom number tells you what type of note gets 1 beat. So in 4/4, the top beat means 4 beats per bar, and the bottom 4 means a quarter note or crotchet is worth 1 beat. So if we change this to 3/4, 3 quarter notes would make up 1 bar. And if we were to change to something like 6/8, we're saying that 6 eighth notes would make up a bar. So let's look at this in MIDI. So this bar is 4 beats long. So if we select the whole note or semi-breve and input that, you can see that the whole note equals the whole bar. And that's what it looks like in score form. So if it's 4 beats long and we use the half note or minim, it will take 2 of them to equal the whole bar. And this is what a minim looks like in the score. So as we are in 4/4, if we use the quarter note or the crotchet, it should take 4 of those to equal the bar. And this is what that would look like in score form. And finally, if we do the same thing with the 8th note or quavers, it's going to take 8 of them to equal the full length of the bar. And this is what that looks like in score form. So in my last video, I said that there was 2 other variations on notes, and those are dotted notes and triplet notes. Let's take a quick look at those. So first, let's take the dotted note. So what the dotted note means is that half of the note's value is added back onto itself again. So if I input a half note, and I then above it put in a dotted half note, you can see it's a bit longer, but it's a bit longer by half. So if I cut this bottom note in half and copy it over, you can see that the dotted note equals its own value plus half. So the triplet note means you play 3 notes in the space of 2. So if I input 2 quarter notes, and I then flick to triplet quarter notes, you can see for the same length of 2, you're playing 3. And in notation, that would look like this for a dotted note, and that for the triplet. So remember when I said that it's important to understand the basic principles of music notation because the timing structure for MIDI inside of Logic is based on it? It's important that we understand the basic principles of musical notation because the timing structure for MIDI inside of Logic is based on that theory.
See, I did say that. Very clever.
This is why. So let's say we're in 4/4 and you want to program in a melody using quarter notes. So if you look at your transport bar, you can see time signature or 4/4 and where to change it. Underneath there is something that says division. This is where you can change the musical grid to show the notes that you're trying to program. If you change this division to 4, can you see the musical grid change? If I change this back to 16ths, see all the additional lines that we're getting? If I change this back to quarter notes. Now if we program in quarter notes, you can see those lines line up exactly to those quarter notes. So if we were to change this to 1/8 notes, you can see that it has changed the step input keyboard automatically to the 1/8 notes. Likewise, if we change this to 16ths, it changes to 16th notes and you get additional lines show up. So what about dotted notes and triplet notes? Well, dotted notes use the same grid as it's just half of that note added back on, but triplet notes use the in-between fractions. So if we are in quarter notes and we change it to 6th notes, we are saying we want quarter note triplets. And now when I program this in, you can see that they line up to the bars on the grid. If we go to triplet 1/8 notes, which would be the one above the 1/8, so 12, and then program these in triplets, you can see again they line up to the bars. And just to show, if we put this back to normal 1/8 notes, you can see that there is 3 notes for every 2 beats. So that is the basic understanding of notation and how it's implemented in Logic with MIDI. So the reason this is important to know is because when you're playing in live and you quantize your recording, you need to know what subdivision of notes you're playing, so you quantize to the right beat. Now obviously you don't always have to quantize and play exactly to the click track. However, it is really important to quantize, especially if you're taking your work outside of MIDI into score notation, because the incorrect note lengths and beats inside of your MIDI will not translate properly into a score editor like MuseScore. So here I'm just going to play in a simple piano part. So this is played in 16th notes, and I'm not going to quantize this, I'm just going to export it as it is as a MIDI file. Now, pressing Q to quantize this MIDI to match exactly 16th notes, or semiquavers, and then delete any notes that are out of place, and then export this as MIDI. Now, when I bring the 2 of these up next to each other, on the left you can see the unquantized MIDI, and the score editor has decided to read this as 3/4 and put random rests all over the place. And on the right side, you can see the quantized MIDI perfectly in 16th notes, nice and neat, in 4/4, looking lovely. And if you're wondering what any of this kind of stuff is, this is called alternation. We're going to look at this in the next video, because this is how you can add in a performance and more realism to your work. Like and subscribe and all that nonsense, and I'll see you in the next one.